Hey everyone, welcome to day one of this Pro Day doubleheader. I am Dan Kaufman, Sport Techies Managing Director. I'm very happy that you're here with us today. I have the pleasure of doing our opening keynote. This is a really special one in my book, and I'm excited for it. It is a conversation with Peter Feigin, President of the Milwaukee Bucks, and Robert Cordova, Chief Technology and Strategy Officer of the Milwaukee Bucks. And we've titled it A Winning Formula: How the Milwaukee Bucks Combine Leadership, Technology, and Innovation into an NBA Championship. Please welcome to the stage representatives from the NBA champion Milwaukee Bucks. Peter, Robert.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, guys. Thank you for being here. Let me start with this question. You won an NBA championship in a very, very challenging time during a pandemic. You did something right, obviously. How'd you do it? That's going to be the center of our conversation. And that's not a one-word answer, but I think that's what I want to know. And by the way, congratulations on that and everything that you've done.
Yeah, I think the most important thing we did was stay extremely flexible, extremely open-minded. We were in a day-to-day situation with everybody from the NBA to the Milwaukee Board of Health to our little labor issues and kind of like what protocols were being. So we kind of open communication. It's almost less the tech and more the leadership and communication of this is going to be an extremely fluid situation. Like things will change daily. Like how do we over communicate and kind of prepare people for what's coming up? And that's as most important for our internal constituents as it is for our fans and external constituents in a big way. So it was unlike anything any of us have ever experienced before, but in real time, we had to figure out egress and ingress. We had to figure out social distancing. We had to figure out, we were kind of fully digital on the ticket side. We were going directionally cashless. We had to figure out our housekeeping and hygiene like everybody else in the industry did. And we went from zero in May to full capacity in the playoffs in a very big way. So we also had a dramatic shift in operating, which is also like a very psychological, physical change where we weren't operating, fully for over a year, and all of a sudden, click, we're back in business in a big way. So I'd say like preparation, communication, and the ability to know like things are going to be chaotic, if that's a way to navigate.
Yeah. Well, let's dive a little bit deeper and let's actually go back to pre-pandemic and 2018 timeframe. You open up your new arena, and I want to think back to that and talk a little bit about let's think of what are the 2 or 3 most important features of that new arena, whether technological or otherwise. And then how did you view those features once the pandemic hit? Were they less valuable, more valuable? And then today, how are you viewing those 2 to 3 features? Whoever wants to start with that, please.
Well, I'll answer 30,000 feet, and then Robert can really talk to kind of like the tactics and the implements of like how we leveraged it. But we built an arena that was open concourse, that was about social interaction, that was the next generation of how do we let people communicate, wander. The entire arena is open flow, so you can get, if you see your destination, you can get there, to make it very easily. We wanted to obviously make this like a connected space, whether that's your second screen, your third screen, whether, it's how we're prepared for the finals. And then we had this overlay of it that we created, an outdoor district that was as important as the indoor district as we started to engage like fans and as we started to create content. So those were the overarching kind of themes, and Robert can kind of tell you about what was important to us, as we opened the doors.
Yes. Yeah. So, and to kind of back up a bit. So what was great too is when it comes to our guest experience, we're all about guest experience. The pandemic really allowed us to accelerate some of the projects that we had in the parking lot to do. So like one of them was like, hey, to get to a more touchless environment, let's do mobile ordering, right? So we would probably have done that in the next 3 to 4 years, but with Clover and Fiserv and their bypass software, we were able to actually accelerate that project. I would say started off kind of rough and kind of really getting it going, but then what was awesome is that slowly building up the number of fans that we had in the stands allowed us to kind of launch it live and improve over the course of a few games. So that was, from a technology perspective, accelerating, pulling projects up, getting the funding and getting it done. That was really exciting. And we had the time to do that. So that was one thing. But going back to like the technology, like what were the most important things? Connectivity, right? I mean, so just to kind of give you the real world there, like, when we use Extenet and JMA Wireless to build out our cellular DAS, we had no carriers. We were guaranteed no carriers. So we even did a whole Wi-Fi system out there in case no carriers came onto our DAS. Well, so 5 carriers came onto our DAS, which was amazing. So whether it's the cellular connectivity or the Wi-Fi connectivity, that becomes this foundation where you can really deploy software and systems, guest-facing, employee-facing, operational, whatever those systems are. And case in point was the mobile ordering, right? Where through our Bucks mobile app, you can go in there and get whatever food you want, and then you pick that up. Well, because our connectivity is so strong and great, that became like a relatively, we didn't have to worry about the connectivity piece, right? And then similarly in our outdoor space, throughout the Deer District, we have connectivity JBTs, giant junction boxes. So if ESPN wants to set up shop on top of one of our balconies overlooking the plaza, we have all the connectivity. And just, that's kind of that unseen thing of there's redundancy there, high availability, all those great things, multiple paths. And that just became, you don't even have to worry about that, right? It's kind of like oxygen, right? You know that it's there, but you just don't worry about it. When it's not there, you really do worry about it. So we had that kind of oxygen with connectivity.
We had a great advantage, Dan. I mean, it doesn't happen too often. We open a new arena, kind of being on the, on really the precipice of technology and kind of best practices. 2 years later, we booked the Democratic National Convention, which never took place, but allowed us to almost upgrade infrastructure, like within 12 months, within a partner for a global event, which was kind of interesting as well.
That is interesting. Well, let's go there then. Let's go to 2020. And thinking about these things that were built into the arena in 2018, were they still just as valuable? Were there some things where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe we had this. It fits perfectly. Walk us through that thought process. And then I want to get to today. And, does it still remain, Robert, in your mind that connectivity is the number one most important thing that you had built in?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can start with like the fact, understanding. So Robert's role is not just our CTO, but like when we built this, Robert came in as literally the master integrator. Like, how do systems, before we put them and construct them, put them in, how do we actually make sure they're integrated? They actually have a purpose. They deal with like our endpoint of like, what the fan experience is like, and to get that done. So, it was interesting. Like we had a pretty seamless like opening year and a half to get it in. But, like every other operator, we realized like just huge opportunities in improving what our digital ticketing process was like, what our ordering was like. I think we kind of said, hey, in a 3-year period, we will be completely cashless. We will be, and obviously like everybody else, what the pandemic did was just help us. And we were very kind of poised to be able to do this with partners like Fiserv. Like our naming rights partner happens to be like the fintech partner of the world. So to have their R&D team and to have us as their petri dish and piloting programs in payment plans and cashless kind of helped us get through the pandemic and literally like launch into the next generation.
Yeah, I mean, like I tell folks, like we are a small business, right? 350 full-time employees on a game day, maybe that goes up to 1,000, right? But we're a small business, big brand, so we depend a lot on our technology partners like Fiserv, like Verizon, and the rest of them because we leverage their smart guys, right? Their teams and their ability to execute, so which has been huge.
Yeah. Robert, you mentioned a number of various vendors, tech vendors that you work with, including obviously Fiserv. But I'm curious to hear how you vet new technologies that come in, what that strategy looks like. I think that our audience would find that interesting. So, Robert, whether that's you or Peter, feel free to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll start on that one. So, I mean, I think both Peter and I have like this whole thing where we just don't do technology for technology's sake, right? So it always has to start. It starts with the why, right? Not the what, right? So there's all kinds of what's out there, vendor brands and stuff, but the why, and the why comes down to the business need, right? So, one thing that I think we've all learned is like, you have to define the problem that you're trying to solve, right? And if that technology is part of that roadmap that you set up for the business side, then yeah, we want to talk to you. And then it comes down. That's kind of the mentality is always go back to the lines of business here to find out what what they need to be successful, whether it's operational efficiencies, driving more revenue, whatever that is. That's kind of like stage gate one, right? Then this might solve the problem that we do have or something that we want to get done. Then is the technology solution, and I stress the word solution there, is it disruptive where it's going to really change the paradigm for the Bucks, or is it incremental? Both are okay, but on the disruptive side, that might entail, job changes and stuff, right? I mean, and I'm sure everybody on this call can appreciate all the inflection points over the past 30 plus years where there's been disruption, like massive disruption that really reorients the business in a lot of ways. So that's kind of where the brains, how do you really decipher that? And how does that really affect your all the roles that you have, all the jobs that you have, right? And then the last thing that I think we overlook oftentimes is like, are they investing in that technology? Do they have that R&D budget that's going to grow as times change? And I know earlier on in my career, I didn't look at the R&D budgets. Now that's a big part of like vetting out, potential partners is like, hey, are you investing in the product, or is it going to kind of die on the vine in a few years? And then like I said, the ability to execute. Once we kind of get these great ideas out there implemented, we have to run them, right? We have to operate them, right? So we want solutions that think about not just the black box, which might be the greatest black box, X in, Z out, but also we need a view inside that black box because we need to operate this in a way where there's always problems, right? That we can solve them because, at an NBA game or a concert, the show must go on, and we have to hop on that and solve it, escalate it, and keep going. So that's kind of how I look at tech. Peter, did you have some stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Robert gets into the nitty gritty. I mean, for me, it's what's additive. I mean, I would say we're a little bit entrepreneurial where we love to explore and be the petri dish, like even with the big players, whether it's the Microsofts or the Oracles or on the consulting side, like what we want to do is we want to innovate. We think like this platform, is so ripe to think differently, whether it's ticketing, whether it's our ecosystem. We happen to be like a district that includes commercial, residential, entertainment, as well as content like outside. So how do we start thinking about our business differently, and how is technology doing it? Robert hates when I just give the cross section of technology and fan experience, and it's a very easy kind of equation for me. It's like, what is additive?
Yeah.
So, you asked about vetting, technical partners. If they can't explain it to me, and I've got a very low level of intellect, like it probably is a good vetting source to be like, it doesn't make sense to an average fan.
Fair enough. Really interesting stuff, guys. Peter, Robert, you hinted at it a little bit. The idea of staff and labor and how tech can affect that, or how new vendors can affect that. But over the past few months, the entire world, and certainly the sports industry, has been affected by a labor shortage or a difficulty in finding labor. I'm curious how you've been approaching that over the past few months, particularly as you see a fan journey that might have more technology that has made less interactions with staff and people. How you've approached that, and then secondly, has it made you think differently at all about the technology you have in place, or what technologies you might put in place in the future?
Yeah, so I mean, I think because day one we were a digital ticketing environment, right? So you went from your phone, you went to the app, you got your barcode, you came in. So there's no physical thing there. Obviously, for folks that don't have phones, or their phone breaks or runs out of power, we can print a ticket, but that's a very small percentage of our guests that are coming in the front doors. So we kind of had a good foundation of which to really even address, like, keeping the environment safe for our guests and for our employees, right? But really what it kind of, once again, accelerate, right? It's accelerating, like, hey, how do we take more of that friction out of the process? We want our guests, as they enter the Deer District in their car, on foot, whatever that is, we want them to get to where they want to get to as fast as they can. So there were a lot of, new solutions that were coming out, and some of them have potential, we think, whether you have like that VIP lane, or facial recognition, or RFID fingerprinting, and being able to really allow that to get the fans in. There were some new magnetometers that came out where instead of having to like open your bag and have the X-ray machine and that friction point, you literally walked right through 10 times the speed. And it had the software to ignore the phone that you might have in your pocket. And so we're trialing out those types of things too. And so it really comes down to like taking that friction out, and that really lends itself to being a very safe environment. One more thing that we did too is kind of trying to understand our crowd, or all of our guests, whether they're coming into Fiserv Forum or if they're out front on the plaza there at a watch party, trying to understand that. And really, and I say this, like, there's a common sense stuff, right, that we all know about. Yeah, on game day, it's going to be this kind of thing. But it's the uncommon sense stuff that we really wanted to use more of that crowd intelligence platform to really ferret out those things so that we could really staff our events. And that was another thing that we did deploy, crowd intelligence with armored things.
Interesting.
And I will just tell you, Dan, like, everybody who's in this industry, like, the world has changed. Like, if you're not preparing for less labor, in the future, like, you're not on the right track. I mean, we are down, 40% in labor. We need our fan experience to be high. There's certainly a human engagement, but we are engaging and using everything from surveillance on a security side much more than we ever have, because of labor. Like, think of your food and beverage is going to trend a lot more grab and go, a lot more customization, a lot more shrinkage of kind of menu size to be able to get that. I mean, the real practical things, what our crowd control, which Robert mentioned, is how do we deploy labor versus, and then, kind of like on the non-technical side, is like, we're going to start redefining like job tasks and cross-train, in what our traditional guest services and security are, in what our food and beverage are, what our housekeeping are. Like, how do we have, multi-skilled positions to be able to redeploy them in different ways. So it has changed the paradigm. I mean, it is a completely different world in all of us in this industry trying to navigate with the labor crisis.
Very interesting. We've got questions coming in from the audience, and we'll try to get to them, but please keep them coming. We definitely want your questions, and I'll do my best to get to the questions that come through. Let's shift, guys, to data collection and usage. And I say that specifically collection and usage because I see them as two different things. And then I also want to talk a little bit about the different types of data that you can gather. And certainly on one hand, we have our business intelligence data, right? Business strategy analytics data that's used to improve your business making decisions. And then you have your athlete-based data, right? The basketball data that is improving both training and on the court performance. In our prep call, Peter, you mentioned, I think, an interesting thing about those two spheres and how they might overlap a little bit in your organization. So maybe if you can, tell us a little bit about how you approach both of those realms and what kind of sharing there might be between the two.
Yeah, so we might be a little bit eclectic in the way we do. Like, our basketball operations and business operations are very connected. So when you think about recruiting, when you think about retention of employees, when you think about best practices, we collaborate in a big way. So our data scientists and analytics folks and insight folks on the basketball side are certainly, like, not day-to-day connected with our business intelligence guys, but what are best practices, what we're modeling, what are different ways to think about it. And it's been beyond helpful on both sides. So I'd say collaborating and sharing on the fact that you've got this kind of what usually are these two different hubs, that sit in the same organization that don't communicate. We actually have like best practices among them in how we're actually grabbing data, how we're creating insights for our users, whether it's a general manager on a basketball analytics side or whether it's the president of the business on a business insight. So that seems like one of the greatest pieces of advice that somebody gave me, and it's really worked out well. And what I would give everybody else is, boy, you've got all these smart people and they're your organizational assets. How they're not connected in some shape or form to at least communicate, because they're kind of under the same umbrella, is a detriment if they don't.
Interesting. So, and then the next question I will ask is, when you think about the tools that are used to collect that data, and Robert, maybe this is a question for you. What are the tools that are being used on the business intelligence side that you find most valuable? Maybe mention a few, and then on the basketball analytics side, if you guys are connected enough in detail on that, I'd love to hear that as well.
Yeah, no, sure. So like Peter just said, it's really about the collaboration, because we are after the same thing, right? How do we ingest the data? How do we make sure the quality of the data sets are there? How do we join them so we can get even better insights and correlations between data sets? So I'll say, like, the big shift over the past few years has been like really going to the cloud. We used to have the data sets here on-prem. Now we are ingesting them into our data lake in the cloud. It's on a Microsoft Azure platform. We use 601A analytics to ingest it and to really make sure that the schemas are right and the quality is there. And then we have our staff that also watches all that. But really, starting about 2.5 years ago, it was like, hey, we need to get all on the business side, all the data's from CRM, from ticket sales, from food and beverage, from merchandise sales, all these things from our social channels. So bring all that data into the data lake. So now we know who Dan is, right? We have that 360 view of Dan. He likes the jerseys. He likes coming on a Friday night, whatever those things are. He likes a beer and a hot dog. That is hugely valuable information. And before this, they were kind of siloed pockets where we had to stitch them together manually, right? So now we have that. And so, on the whole, like, progression of like descriptive to predictive to prescriptive, we're still in just the descriptive part of that journey. So it's just great to actually surface the stuff. So the lines of business from Peter on down can see what's going on. And so we use Power BI for that, which makes it very easy to build those dashboards that you can access on your desktop or on your smartphone. And but the one thing that's the challenge, right? And Peter always reminds me of this almost ad nauseum, is that if he's not looking at these dashboards, if we're building the greatest dashboards in the world with data points, if he doesn't know about them, they are valueless, right? So having that kind of like always thinking about user adoption, and really having evangelists out there. And it's kind of tough for IT guys to be evangelists, but we do have some of those here. So that's the other piece of this that we always need to pay attention to, is user adoption.
Yeah.
And Dan, IT guys, they try to complicate everything possible, and they just can't. They just can't make the simplest chart in the world. It's got to be, let's click through 15 times to get the data point you actually want. Why don't we just simplify this? It's got to be a deeper discussion. This doesn't make sense. So Robert goes into his, 20 minutes, and I just ask, can we just see what hourly sales are? Is that so tough? Yeah.
It's a lot the way that people describe lawyers too, right? Like, just overcomplicate everything, give it to us straight. Well, but Peter, I'm interested. I mean, like, that is a good question, I think. And the question is, like, okay, you get all this data, and then you got to put it in some way where someone can comprehend it to make a smart decision, right? And so, what have you found most valuable, Peter, when you need to make those decisions? What data do you want to see, and how do you want to see it presented?
So I look at two things. Like, I kind of like ask Robert and our analytics folks to tell me what's actionable. Like, let's synthesize this to like the most like important trends, like two things. One is like what's happening, so like I need people to like look at this and say, by the way, here's what's trending, like in a big way, so we can have some future look at it. And the other part is like, I'm a big fan of like, kind of there are low hanging fruit things actionable every day. So if we've got real time data, which we're dashboarding, which we're looking at, I want the managers to be able to make real time decisions and pivot.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Can you still?
All right. I think we had a slight hiccup there. I can hear you guys.
Yeah, can you hear us? Like that
Yes.
That's one of the greatest moves that ever happened on an IT tech call. Our whole office just blacked out.
Uh-oh. Well, I can hear you now, Peter, but I think we may have lost Robert.
Trying to get you back. All right,
I'm back.
All right.
We just had a power surge here at the Bucks.
Uh-oh. All right. Well,
is that a test from Sports Techie? Like,
yeah.
Is that? Did you guys throw on the poison pill?
That's how we collect data.
What's the stage hook?
No worries, guys. So Peter, go ahead if you've got more, but I've got a couple more questions I want to get to before we run out of time.
Yeah, I think like, listen, you can get overwhelmed by data, and we're certainly like in year 2 or year 3 of what do we fill our lake with? What do we want to grab out of it? How do we want it? So my big pleasure is I certainly know what the KPIs I like are. Like, I love P&L operators that, want to dictate like what theirs are. Yeah. And then kind of the accountability is, how do you simplify it? And I want things reduced down to simple insights, like what are we doing on a weekly? What are we doing on a monthly? What has to be done in the short term, which for us is 6 months, and what has to be done in the long term. And that's really what the insights could be. And we want folks that are kind of understand the business acumen, understand all the levers like within the entire business and basketball, who can give you those like rational business insights, on what's happening.
Interesting. We've got a question from the audience that I want to get to. It's a question from Jessica Gaffney. Jessica, thank you for the question. How much does feedback from ops, sales and service, get taken into consideration when vetting new tech solutions, i.e. from team employees who are customer facing?
It's a great question. It gets vetted. It's involved. Our biggest challenge sometimes is we get this leverage from partnerships, and the ability to bring in a tech partner as a sponsor and drive revenue, at a high level. And part of that deal would be, how do we leverage or integrate their technology, in what we're doing, which is an interesting kind of thing that doesn't happen too often in other businesses. In other businesses, you have clear path vetting, efficiencies, and done. So on the ticketing side, it's such the backbone of the core of our business that they're involved, and it has really evolved that our ticketing and service group has really become like the pulse of the customer in a big way. They are as worried about this frictionless experience and the seamlessness of parking, to their ebb and flow inside, to what their F&B per caps are on the premium side. So we use that group as almost like the thermometer, for like how we're doing, like with the customer and the fan in a big way. So their input is like beyond essential. I mean, our Jamie Weinstein, who runs our ticketing service, is a member of the operating committee. She's got beyond a voice. She economically runs, 25% of the business. It's a big deal.
Interesting. Great answer, Peter. Thank you. And thanks for the question, Jessica. Let's jump quickly, guys, to the virtual fan experience. We talked a lot about the in-venue experience, but certainly that experience away from the venue has become something that's critically important. Robert, maybe I'll turn to you. What strides have you made in engaging fans away from the venue, particularly during the pandemic, and what's going to continue to stick around even as we are getting fans back in full capacity?
No, sure. I mean, so especially during COVID-19, the virtual journey became even that much more important. And then also with just the world stage that we were on, right? The international virtual journey as well. Like we have fans all over the world. We've always have had them, but like it's 10x that now, right? Like wherever I go, people are telling me about the Bucks. People are telling me about Milwaukee and the Deer District. What a cool place it must be, right? So if they can't come here physically, how can we really give them what they want still, right? So that's where the virtual journey comes in. So, you know, we put a lot of investment into our social channels. We've had a mobile app since we opened the doors 4 years ago. And really those become kind of those hinge pins of how we engage. But, you know, the whole over the top world right now, you know, second screen content, these are all things that we know can complement, can really add to the experience. And we are looking at those things right now. So whether it's the virtual watch party during a game, these are all things, or if you're in the seat, having that second screen there too. There's so those are all things that we are definitely looking at right now and want to make sure that we continue to improve that virtual journey and experience.
And I think that ties really well into another question I want to ask, which is really a look forward, right? And to think that you have, you know, an international superstar in Giannis, and then you just won an NBA championship, which further broadened your brand, obviously. How do you look at that from an innovation and growth perspective, both when it was happening, right? When you were in the playoffs and there was the possibility that you could win it all. And then two, now, like, how do you continue that growth and innovation to continue to improve and broaden the popularity of your club and of all your fans?
Yeah, well, I think you're kind of gifted this incredible platform in this audience that you can't even imagine what it's like to be in the NBA Finals and what it does for the focus of broadcast in 215 countries. Here's like the national spotlight. There's nothing else going on for us. It was, you know, life by a fire hose. You know, how do we quickly figure out how to leverage and kind of do this kind of ramp up to a championship in a big way, and kind of change our platform from being really local and regional to being national and global, like in a big way. And a lot of that happens through partnerships, you know, and discussions. And a lot of that happens like naturally, you know, as you're on that platform. So I can tell you, like, you know, Robert's helped build this infrastructure over the last, you know, 5 to 6 years. We kind of came in with new ownership group. We were very like localized, you know, in a big way. We were very prospect oriented and had to make the dials to build marketplace, sell tickets, hand-to-hand combat. You know, what this does is change that paradigm where people are interested in calling into us and how do we leverage and how do we prioritize, like where we really want to focus. So it's fascinating. I mean, the world is today, I think, you know, the Staples Center announced that it's going to go to crypto, you know, arena. What's happening with sports betting and gambling, you know, what's happens to us is now we now are one of the preeminent brands, you know, and one in the best league in the world, like on a global stage. How do we take that opportunity for all this is evolving and leverage the hell out of it?
Well, this has been fantastic, guys. We're running up on time, but I have one more very important question, and this actually comes from our Sport Techies senior editor, Tom Friend, and his question is this: who came up with Fear the Deer? Because it's brilliant.
I'll tell you, we have like the greatest CMO in the world, and he revived that from something that had been used like decades ago as we were kind of literally going through archives. Like, what do you think? And it was like an element of our rebranding. So I'm sure people don't realize it, but we kind of tweaked this deer to be fierce and motivated and you know, hungry to win. And with that image change, the fear factor came into it, and it all kind of made sense, and kind of went in with what our imagery was, what our tonality was, and kind of how we rebranded 5 years ago.
Well, it worked. Peter and Robert, thank you so much for your time. A virtual round of applause. Really appreciate it. To the audience, don't go anywhere. We've got more throughout the day and tomorrow. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Great being here. Fear the deer.